Welcome to the Golden Seams podcast. I'm Gabe, and along with my co-host Michae, we're thrilled to have you join us on this transformative journey of self-discovery and personal growth. Our podcast is all about helping you uncover your authentic self, find your true calling, and create prosperity in alignment with your deepest values and aspirations.
We're diving deep into the theme of boundaries, a crucial aspect of living authentically and pursuing your true path. Exploring Melissa Urban's insightful book, The Book of Boundaries. Setting healthy boundaries with family members isn't just about improving relations with your immediate and extended family. This practice can have a positive impact on all of your relationships because the relationships you create with your family often carry forward into romantic partnerships, adult friendships, and work interactions. That's a quote from Melissa Urban's The Book of Boundaries, Set the Limits That Will Set You Free from Ch4, When the Drama is Your Mama, setting boundaries with parents and in-laws, grandparents, and other family members. We're going to be covering better boundaries and why they create stronger families, how this translates into all of your relationships and even the roles we play in life with our careers. We're going to be touching on the roles we play in families and how this affects family dynamics and boundaries. What it looks like when family members don't respect your boundaries, Melissa's 3 categories of family members, and how she breaks boundaries down according to these 3 categories: parents and in-laws, grandparents, and other family members, why your partner may not see their families or their parents' behaviors as needing a boundary, and what you may encounter if you do. We'll be talking about Melissa's fabulous in-law rule and how this has to be laid out to be successful, Melissa's strategy with where to start for creating boundaries, her magic number trick, great conversations helping to set boundaries with grandparents, broken down so you can make it work, boundaries and favors, a huge one, especially with relatives, setting boundaries with family members who have done you a favor, whether it's lending you money, letting you move back in, or helping you get a job, talking about pushback and guilt, Melissa's prep tips for setting boundaries with family, side effects of setting boundaries with family, a boundary strategy, Melissa's fantastic scripts, and what to do when someone paints you as the bad guy in front of others when you do need to set a boundary, responding to accusations when making a boundary, also known as when they accuse you of forcing them to your will, and how to respond when you're, quote, changing the rules because you always wanted to set a boundary but didn't or couldn't, and then you finally do. And we'll also be discussing rules if you're the one lending money, finishing out with boundaries with kids at different ages. We're doing boundaries in a very different way. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, subscribers, followers, and especially our wonderful Patreon members for your support, sharing this community and this path, quoting us, tagging us, whatever kind acts you do with your friends, family, colleagues, and those who, well, just get it. Your gentle but powerful acts of support, no matter how small, tell us and the world this resonates. So we thank you, wholly and fully from our hearts, for being the catalyst wherever you are, because it only takes one step forward to begin to step into your magnificence. Melissa says boundaries with family members are complicated by a number of factors, including some of the power dynamics discussed in Chapter 3. Now that you're a fully grown adult, you see how hard those patterns are to break. You no longer necessarily need or want your parents' feedback or assistance, but parents are going to parent, and their often well-intentioned desire to help can sometimes feel pushy, like they're overstepping. The patterns you create in childhood are stored in the body, so even if you logically realize how dysfunctional or unhealthy they were, it feels almost automatic for everyone to return to those roles when you're together now. It can also be hard for parents to see their kids as fully functioning adults with their own lived experiences, goals, and opinions, capable of making their own decisions and running their own lives. And the same can apply to siblings or other relatives. If you spent time together during childhood, those patterns set when you were kids can continue to show up now in adulthood. Even if you're all in therapy, if your parents had favorites, if one of you always got your way, if you were used to being the peacemaker, or if your family was so big you felt invisible, those childhood dynamics may still find a seat at your family dinner table, even for adults. It's extremely powerful, the different roles we play in families and how this affects family dynamics and the boundaries that we set. It's also interesting how, depending on what role you play in your family, it also translates over, sort of overlays onto your career or other roles with friends or other individuals. I'm trained in RTT with Marissa Peer. She gives 4 archetypal roles with families. I find this very powerful in the work that I do in understanding my clients and some of the individuals. She has the carer. This is the individual who takes on the responsibility of looking after others, often neglecting their own needs. There's the sick one. This person may use illness or vulnerability to receive attention and care from the family. The achiever. This role involves striving for success and recognition to gain approval and validation. And the rebel. This member often challenges authority and norms, acting out to express their individuality or distress. I find that when someone plays one of these roles, it carries over into other parts of their lives. For example, a lot of times people who are carers in their own families tend to be nurses or something along those lines. They take a career path in that direction. If they are the achiever, what you'll find out is that person is always the overachiever. They're always excelling. They tend to be the shiny, bright one in the family, even though everybody else is doing their own thing. And each person takes a role. If they're the sick one, and that can be a hypochondriac or someone who's not even sick, they just think they're sick. And what's more interesting is quite often the carer who's caring for everybody is the one who actually gets really sick, but there's this other person who thinks they're sick or feigns being sick, considers that their role. And this is all unconscious, but it's happening. And then, of course, the rebel. And there's different ways that this is described in a lot of different forms of psychology. Still, there are roles in families. Understanding your role or identifying with your role, which one makes more sense to you, can help you in setting boundaries, so that if you know that you tend to be a carer and therefore you put all of your needs on the back burner and take care of everybody else, this is something for you to really pay attention to, because it's wise for you to set some boundaries. If you tend to be the achiever, this is a place where you might want to set some boundaries with yourself, where you can relax a little. You don't have to do so much and excel to be loved. And that's the goal here, is all of these roles. The end game is, if I do this, then I'm loved. This is my role in the family. Therefore, this is how I receive love. This is how I give love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's powerful.
It is.
I can't even pinpoint back. I feel like I've fluctuated between a few of these roles in my lifetime even.
I agree with that. It's so true. If you're, for example, the sick one, then you get cared for.
Right.
The person can be truly sick. There's sort of an overlap. One can flow into the other. And of course, the rebel. This person gets a lot of attention. They go against the flow. It's just parts of families. It gives you an idea. And if any of that resonates, keep in mind, how can that play into you creating a boundary?
Right. Understanding the reactions, or things to consider if you're going to try to automate, how to communicate. If you can identify yours, I think it becomes easier to identify your family members too.
Absolutely. And the other piece is, since boundaries always start with ourselves, it empowers you to say, okay, well, I tend to be the rebel. I tend to this, or in this particular situation, I tend to be the rebel, or whatever it is. And then how do you want to set a boundary around that?
Right.
Play with it a little. It's just additional information, but I feel family roles really can help you in setting boundaries once you start understanding that.
No, I think that this is awesome. I think these are patterns that I was not aware of, and a lot of them feel like reflexes to certain situations or moments in my life, and I can see how they can easily become enmeshed with my sense of self if I don't put an awareness on them, and how that can carry it into my work and into my other relationships too.
Oh, completely. I like how Melissa says one person's oops, that's too far, as another one's works for me. She talks about you define your own boundaries with different members based on the individual and the circumstances. And that makes so much sense to me, but I think that that's with everyone and everything. It does seem to be right up front with family.
Yeah.
She says you also might find you need one boundary for one set of parents and something entirely different for another. And she also says you don't have to set a boundary in any given area because others have decided to. Only you know the limits that work best for you. And it's okay. She says it's even healthy if those limits change based on the content, the people involved, and the season of life you're in. So she always keeps this flexible membrane around the boundaries you set. Want to experience the full power of the golden seams? Head over to our Patreon now and join us as a Golden Alchemist or on the Kintsugi path, where you'll get access to our transformative deep meditation, powerful subliminal audio, and a custom mandala, all designed to help you manifest the life you truly desire. Don't wait to start living authentically. Join the Golden Seams Patreon today and remember who you truly are. Gabe, let's talk about what it looks like when family members don't respect your boundaries.
Oh man, where do we start? I think a lot of it comes from what she describes. There's that transition period where for a long time our parents help determine the boundaries for us because we're not self-sufficient, self-aware enough to make intelligent decisions in that capacity. But that transition into adulthood, independence, autonomy, sovereignty, I think is not always smooth, wrinkle-free. I think it becomes a personal discussion, almost as if, for me, it felt like starting to try to take something from them. And that makes a hard contrast to taking ownership and accountability for myself too. Seeing that it comes from a place of love, understanding the good intention behind it still is a little tricky to separate.
So true.
Melissa then goes on to describe a couple situations where family members might be crossing your boundaries and what it might look like. Visiting unannounced or staying longer than is welcome, inserting themselves into your plans, vacations, births, jobs, gossiping, negative talk, or oversharing about other family members, refusing to respect names, pronouns, or gender identities, sharing your personal details or photos without your permission, saying hurtful things because they care, forcing hugs or kisses on you and or your kids, taking over your space, attempting to parent your children, interfering with your relationship or personal life, setting unreasonable expectations around time together, frequently scheduled dinners or holidays, breaking your rules around food, screen time, or video games when your kids visit, borrowing money, cars, or other possessions in a way that feels egregious, assuming you'll help with babysitting, dog sitting, or other care tasks, unreasonable time spent at your home, eating, doing laundry, or sleeping over, interrupting alone time or self-care practices, letting themselves into your home without notice or permission, forcing discussions on relationships, child status, career path, or religious practices, pressuring attendance at family gatherings, holidays, and other events.
That's a great list that frames. My head is going in about 1,000 directions based
Mine
off
too.
of that. There's several on there that I recognize.
Some of those are even my moves.
Not me, Gabe. I'm good. Just kidding. Totally. It's totally everybody, right? We've all done things. One for me that stands out at least the strongest is sharing your personal details without your permission. That's a big one to me. That created a lot of animosity and competitiveness that's unnecessary within my family. I don't think it's a good move in any way when people do it. Plus, I always feel that creates sort of an energy and a focus on that person that's not exactly necessary when other people feel competitive or even jealous towards that person and they don't even know all the details.
Yeah, they're not advocating for themselves. They're getting a distorted game of telephone version of the events or happenings or situation.
And the truth is, in an ideal situation, we're all happy for each other's successes and so forth. But if somebody's struggling and then they hear you're doing really well and that gets pushed in their face as a sort of a comparative note of, well, such and such is doing really well, why aren't you? So I think sharing those personal details, it can be hurtful. It's not intentional always, but it can be hurtful. And I do remember having that discussion with my parents many times where I asked them to please refrain from talking about me personally or my child or my life over and over and over again. I do remember being told, you can't tell me what to say. I'm your parent. Okay. And I would ask again and again and again.
Third one's the charm.
It didn't stick when I said, please stop, and it didn't make sense for them. They couldn't wrap their minds around it. That one really stands out for being very hurtful. I value her bringing it up here.
I agree with that. So Melissa goes on to describe the different categories of family boundaries. Parents and in-laws. Most of the boundaries we want to set with parents and in-laws involve an overstep into your life space, time, or values as an adult. It can be hard for parents to watch their child shift their attention, devotion, and priorities to a partner or spouse, and it can bring up jealousy, a sense of competition, and regret over missed opportunities. Grandparents. Grandparents can be opinionated when it comes to the way you are raising your own children, and sometimes those opinions carry over into contradicting your rules, parenting style, or instructions. Other family members. Setting boundaries with other family members can have positive effects that reverberate through an entire clan, but they may cause some shockwaves in the beginning. Remember that clear is kind, and most important, remind yourself that boundaries are not selfish because they'll improve all of your family dynamics. Also, patience is key anytime you're looking to change generational patterns. It might not happen overnight, but with consistency, things will change.
Patience is key because you're looking at generational patterns. That's a big deal that she pointed that out.
Yeah, I think so too. It takes a lot of acknowledgement to bring awareness to the blind spots. And when we have a lot of people with the same blind spots, it might take longer than you think.
And those generational patterns, those beliefs that have been accepted of this is how we do it, those can be a big deal. So it does take repetition and consistency.
And kindness, I think, is a big help in this. It's easy for things to escalate when you're hitting a soft spot in a family conversation.
Very true. Melissa brings up setting boundaries with your in-laws. I find this very powerful when she says any boundary crossing, manipulative, passive-aggressive patterns you're now experiencing firsthand are all too familiar to your spouse or partner. It's likely your partner felt run over the same way starting in childhood, and it's super likely your partner has simply learned to live with their unreasonable demands or oversteps until you showed up. This is such a big deal for why your partner may not see their family's behaviors or their parents' patterns as needing a boundary. She continues on about what you need to do and what you may encounter if you do these things. She says that if you're the one driving the change, be aware that leading the charge means that there's a lot of difficult things you could run into. You do run the risk, as Melissa puts it, of becoming the villain in this story. Potentially your in-laws or those other family members may see you as making waves, disturbing the peace, coming between them and their child, and taking away privileges they've been used to for decades. She says to state the obvious, they're not going to like it. And then you may be asking your spouse to choose between your needs and their parents' feelings, which is also very difficult. It becomes more difficult if your in-laws reinforce the narrative that this is a battle where sides must be drawn. That is very difficult. And then your partner is in the middle because they just want to keep the peace and they're going to do their best to do that to placate all parties. She also says you're going to want to set reasonable limits that need to be respected, but that your in-laws are likely to play their kid like a fiddle to get what they want. And then Melissa goes into the strategy. This is a great strategy. She says, unless you and your partner can start working as a team. She has one overarching best practice rule that she refers to as the in-law rule, which states, present a united front, but handle your own parents. That's brilliant. She says, even if the boundary originated with you, it's most effectively implemented if you both agree this is a healthy limit you need to set as a couple. Then it's your partner's job to handle the conversation with their own parents on both of your behalf. This does not include your partner telling their parents it was your idea, because basically that's throwing you under the bus.
Right.
I'm just going to sum that up. She says that your partner needs to present this boundary to their parents in a way that shows that those preferences come from both of you. And if you two are divided, you have no chance of holding an effective limit with an overbearing parent. I really agree with that. You've got to stand together, literally as a partnership and a team. This is the reason why I'm divorced, because I was not willing to constantly be under the rule of thumb of my ex-husband's mother. It's just not worth it. For me, I just started losing respect for him. It was almost like he expected me to protect him from his mother. It felt gross. So I can just...
that story's probably been going on for a while.
Yeah. And so all of the stuff that Melissa is talking about, how your partner or your spouse acclimated themselves to bend to live in their parents' world, especially if they have a dominating parent, I've experienced that. I've seen it. What I can say is she is completely right. If you do not stand as a united front and they cannot stand up to their own parents, it's going to be a real challenge. And she does give some exceptions a little bit later. She gives a layout for what it takes for it to be successful. She says it's important for them to tell their parents, for example, we are requesting whatever it is. We are in agreement on this. We both feel this way and we'll hold this boundary together. And then it's important for them to say, we will impose the following consequences or whatever. We're going to have to take action here if you do not respect our boundary or whatever it is that you're requesting. And she said, be prepared because this is going to feel really uncomfortable to your partner. If that's the case, she says, first of all, confirm with your partner that you have their full support with this boundary, even though you're the one doing the talking. So if it ends up that you're going to have to set the boundary with your in-laws, make sure that your partner is in full support of what you're going to share and that you two have an agreement on this beforehand. And then get clarity on how your partner is willing to support you during the conversation. If they can't agree to be there, even in silent support, or at the very least, if their parents try to insert a wedge by asking them when they are there, is this what you want? Melissa says your partner needs to be willing to say, yes, I am with you. Because otherwise, she says, you could end up in a situation where sides are taken and you feel abandoned and betrayed. I think that this comes up in every marriage and every relationship that's long-term at some point. It just does. I don't even think it has to be this much of an assertive conversation as what we're seeing here, unless it's really out of hand. When I first got with my husband, who I divorced, we moved in together. Immediately, his mother requested his sister. He comes to me and he says, my sister's flying out to meet you and her husband. No conversation to me, no discussion, nothing. His mother had said that his sister had to come out and meet me and then report back to his mother. Okay, this was a huge red flag to me. I said, here's a heads up. You didn't discuss this with me first. Your mother is not in this relationship. You and I are in this relationship. You need to go back, call your sister, tell her not to come. Because here's the piece that nobody else has thought of. If your sister gets here and I don't approve of her, you're out. I should have run the other way because this is how this family dynamic worked. And from that point forward, his mother understood what my boundary was, but then I later learned he had to pay for the flights and the airline tickets and then eat that. He set everything up according to what his mother wanted because she was used to running the show. I can't tell you how much I didn't respect him for that. I felt like I was dating a child. But I didn't find out all the details until later. And when I did, I went, who are you?
Yeah, it sounds like espionage.
So Melissa goes on and she shares the exception to the in-law rule. And that's just the beginning of our journey into boundaries and self-discovery. If you're ready to transform your life, create prosperity aligned with your authentic self, and master the art of setting clear, kind boundaries, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
Thank you for joining us on the Golden Seams podcast. We're truly grateful for your presence and participation in this journey of self-discovery and personal growth. Remember, your path to authenticity and prosperity is unique, and we're honored to be a part of it. If you found value in today's episode, we invite you to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep shining your authentic light. This is Gabe and Michae signing off from the Golden Seams. May your path be golden, and may you find the strength to mend and beautify the broken parts of your life, just like the art of kintsugi. Take care, and we'll see you in our next episode.
Thanks, everyone.